Okay, now that we know a little bit about the interface, how we can navigate using primitives, let's just take a look at a little exercise using primitives so we can make some kind of simple shape like a toy truck or something like that. So we're going to go ahead and say create polygon primitives, and let's use a cube, and we're going to make the cube in here. Let's put on the scale tool that we have here, so we can take this shape and then we can kind of push it like this. Let's tap W to move it on the move tool. You can see the grid is visible here, and we're just going to kind of move this above the grid right here like this. I'm going to tap R to put it onto the scale tool and just scale down a little bit. Now if I go to the options for this on this cube, we can do this and change the subdivisions on the depth. If we do this right down in the middle, we've got that, and then we've got subdivisions on the width. So maybe we can do something right here like this. I'm going to give a little section here, and then we've already talked about in the other videos, if we select this object and we right click and we say face, we can take this face here, hold down shift and select this face, and we can shift right click and extrude face, or we can go to edit mesh and extrude, and then we'll put this in movement for object mode instead of the component normal mode. We'll just pull this up just a little bit. And then now what we can do is right click over here and say edge, and we can take our edges and hold down shift to select multiple ones, put on the move tool that you see here, or tap W, and we'll just kind of move this forward just a little bit. And then maybe on this one we'll right click and say face, and we'll select these faces back here and just kind of push this forward just a little bit like that. Okay, now if we want to straighten up these edges, we can hit F10, we can right click and say edge, multiple ways of doing this, and we can move this along through here. So you can kind of eyeball it, but if you hold down V, if you remember looking up here in the interface about snapping to points, if you hold down V and just move along this axis just right here, you can move these back and it'll snap to wherever you're kind of on these points. So let's go ahead and go to these edges here, and let's go ahead and move them, and I'm going to hold down V and I'm going to snap right here like that. Okay, now this is looking pretty good. What I want to do is select this edge, and I'm going to tap R to put it on the scale tool, and I'm just going to scale this in just a little bit like that right there, and I think that looks pretty cool. I think we're just going to make a funky looking little truck thing here, and we're going to go ahead and say create polygon primitives, and we'll use a cylinder this time. The cylinder is going to be not in the right orientation. We could change that if we went to the cylinder options and then said where are we going to create it along the x-axis. But you could always rotate this thing into place after you're done. So if we tap E, if we put on the rotate tool and then move it, we can rotate it this way. Remember, I'm going to hit undo. If we hold down J, you can snap in degree increments. Or you can kind of rotate it a little bit and then kind of figure out in the channel box and say, yeah, I need to rotate that, and I want it to be negative 90 degrees. So I'll just put this on the move tool, tap W for this, move this forward right in through here, push this thing out if it was going to be a tire, and then kind of give it, scale it up right here. And we want it to be something about like what we would consider the right scale of this tire. So I'm just going to kind of get this in position here, push it forward like that. And then what I'm going to do is if we tap the space bar, we can go to the front and side views as well. So from any one of these views, we can kind of move this into place and maybe scale this up a little bit more. And what I want to do is get this to where it basically sits on the bottom plane right here at the bottom of the grid. Okay, now they got the tire the right size. I'm going to hit F8 for that, or you can always right click and say object mode to select in the object mode and just kind of push it back here like this. And now I think I like the position of that. I like this tire, so I want to duplicate it. So we can hit Control D, or we can go edit and say duplicate. Once we have a duplicate version of that, we can just, let me just hit Control D for that and then push this back right in through here. And then this will be the back tire that we have. Now something else that you want to know is that you can come in through here, we can double click and we call this body of the truck. We can call this wheel, and we can call this maybe underscore front. And this is actually the left. So I'm going to do underscore L like that. And I can double click in here and I can copy the text of this and I'll paste it into the back. And we've got wheel front, and we'll change that to back, just like that, right? Now, what I was telling you about before is that we can make groups and hierarchies. So if we select everything like this, select the top one, hold down shift and select that, and we can hit Control G, or we can go to edit and we can group. If we do that, we can call this whole thing truck like this. And what's kind of neat is that we now have something to select the entire truck, and we can move this whole thing around as if it's one object. And we can always go in here and we can still have control over these things here. Something else to note about objects is that you see that we've got the translation and scale, and we've got all the options for this. If we delete the history on that, if we go to edit, delete by type, and we do history, you can see it's going to get rid of those options for it. It's going to flatten this model down. I'm going to hold on Alt-Shift-D for that one, Alt-Shift-D for this one. And then we can also do this. We're going to go up here and say modify, and we're going to say freeze transformations. Let's just look at the option box for this. We're going to freeze translation, rotation, and scale. So watch what happens to the values of this whenever we freeze this out. We're going to hit apply. And you can see now that this object is locked in its current position and everything is kind of zeroed out. So if I move this thing back, and I always want to get it back to where it was at, I can just go and type in a 0 for that. So that makes that kind of handy. Let's take the wheels and we'll apply that to the front wheel. We'll apply it to the back wheel. Okay, and then you can have groups within inside of groups. So this will be kind of interesting where we can take the front wheel and the back wheel, select them together, hit Control G, and we'll call this wheels, and we'll call this underscore L, like that. Now if we duplicate this and we go to say edit and we say duplicate, we can duplicate that and we can call this wheels underscore right. And then if we open this up, you can see we've got our wheels in here. Let's just double click this, change this to underscore R, and change this to underscore R as well. And then what we want to do with this group is now give it a negative scale in X. And if we do that, let's go ahead and select this again real quick. I'm going to select this here, type in -1 for the scale for the X. And I'm going to go ahead and hit undo for that. And I made a little mistake here, and I just realized it now. If I take a look at the origin of the world, you can see this is positive Z, this is X. So I've actually been building this along the X-axis instead. And here's what's kind of neat. Since we made this group, we can just rotate the whole thing. So I got the truck, I'll put it on the move tool, and we'll move it right here like this, and I'll make it -90 degrees. And it's an easy way to fix that problem. We've got -90 degrees on this, and if we freeze out the transformation of this is the parent and all these things underneath are children. So if we go to modify freeze transformations option box and then hit apply, you can see it's going to reset the orientation, but it's going to do it for all these different pieces as well. So now I can take this group, I can give it a -1 for a scale, and you can see that it's going to have those wheels on the correct side here like that. And I think the next thing I'll do is just right click and say edge. I'll go to the body of the truck, tap W to kind of move this thing down just a little bit like that, and kind of make it just look a little more cool, and maybe pull this out just ever so slightly. So this is a good way that you can take the primitives and you make something that's called basically a proxy object, something that if you're going to make a film or a game or anything else like that, you can actually use these things and kind of have them as a stand-in for something else that's going to be built a little bit later. Okay, so there's that. The other thing I like to do is take my cameras and hit Control G and group them and call them cameras. And so there you have it. You've got a nice little scene here. I might select everything, tap the space bar, and then just go into each one of these views and tap F like this, and then go back here. And then after you're done, then you'll want to go ahead and say File, Save Scene As, and then save it to some kind of location where you want to preserve this.